Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel, where today we are going to be doing my mid-month wrap-up for December. So let's just jump right in with the very first thing, which is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. So The Unhoneymooners is an adult contemporary romance, and we are following our main character of Olive. Olive is the maid of honor for her sister, and at the wedding reception, almost everybody at the reception ends up getting food poisoning except for Olive and the best man. Now, Olive's sister won this honeymoon in a giveaway and is just very insistent that somebody should go, even if she can't. And so Olive ends up taking her place, and this best man ends up taking the groom's place. However, the best man is the groom's brother. Olive already knows him and also just kind of hates him, and the story goes from there. So this book is very popular on YouTube. However, I ended up DNFing it at page 94. The reality of this is not something I probably should have ever picked up, because if I had thought about how Olive was going to end up going on this honeymoon, basically that she's pretending to be her sister, because this wasn't something, this honeymoon package wasn't supposed to be for anybody other than Olive's sister and the groom, the bride and groom. I probably would have passed, because that level of deception and dishonesty at, passing as her sister is something that I'm incredibly uncomfortable with. But even apart from all of that, I didn't like Olive. So Olive has a tendency to jump to conclusions on very little information, and she also makes really bad decisions in high stress situations, which the first 100 pages that I read was basically one high stress situation after another. And so she really wasn't making good decisions and jumping to conclusions, and I was just so unhappy with her. Additionally, our love interest, Ethan, doesn't seem to have any redeemable qualities at all, and so that wasn't fun to read either. And it's a single perspective romance, so we by the time I got to 100 pages, they still hadn't even had an inkling that maybe there were sparks. And so I didn't really love reading about Ethan from Olive's perspective, and it wasn't good. And then I ended up leaving it at this one spot where basically Olive was put in this situation that just suspended my disbelief so hard that I just couldn't do it anymore. So it was just I am very good at suspending disbelief for romance, and this was just over the top. So basically I put it down to go do something else, and then when I wanted to read again, I realized I really didn't want to read this, and that's the point where I DNF'd it. So after that, I went ahead and picked up The Bronze Beast by Roshani Chokshi. So this is the third book in the Gilded Wolves trilogy, which is a young adult historical fantasy trilogy where we're following a group of thieves as they actually track down these ancient artifacts, magical artifacts, and work out puzzles and try to figure out how to steal it and actually go about stealing it. And in this particular book, they have been hot on the trail of this very powerful ancient artifact, and that various members of this group want for various reasons, and they are on a deadline, and it will be very interesting to see if they can actually make that deadline, and also, is this artifact something that should even be in the hands of anybody at all? And the story goes from there. So, I have already done a full-length review for this trilogy, so I will leave it linked down below. But basically, I liked this book despite its flaws. And there are a number of flaws. Like the fact that we got more world building, but it wasn't like fully fledged world building. The magic system is terrible. Basically, calling it a system is being generous. We don't actually have enough information to have a functional system. I really, really like these characters, and I loved watching them interact together. And they did have some really interesting character arcs, but none of the character arcs really felt like they kind of stuck the landing at the end of this one. The plot itself was interesting, but there were some funky things that happened around the climactic events. So for example, like I found it very difficult to picture what was going on at the climax. So it was enough that I got what was going on, but I don't think I got a ton of the finer details. But also the pace slowed down at the climactic event, like at the climax, which is kind of weird and not what you would expect. And like it just was a little strange. But what I will say is I actually really liked the ending in the sense of like it definitely went in directions that I wasn't expecting and I actually really appreciate. And additionally, after that climax, we had a nice length, the afterword was a nice length. It was long enough that we got to see what was going on with these characters and how they handled the events without being particularly drawn out or slow paced. So I really, really appreciated that. It gave me a good amount of time to be able to kind of say goodbye to these characters. So like, yeah, I mean, I definitely saw the flaws of this particular book and this series as a whole. However, I still really, really enjoyed it, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. So after that, I picked up Snapshot by Brandon Sanderson. So this is a non-Cosmere novella. It's actually a science fiction novella, and essentially the idea is that there is this system kind of thing in the city where you can pick a day from the last like 2 weeks and you can recreate it in this system, and you can actually go and visit it and see what happened throughout the entire city that day. And we are following our two main characters who are detectives, and so they go into the simulation in particular on specific days to kind of see what happened with various crimes, see if they can track down evidence, that kind of thing. And they are doing this on one routine day until something kind of funky happens where they are thinking maybe the police department is keeping something from them. So they decide to investigate it. And the story goes from there. I'm going to just come out and say it. I did not like this. So let's start with the good. I thought that this was an incredibly interesting premise, that there's so much potential that you can do with it. I think that there were a lot of interesting philosophical ideas that were touched on, but we couldn't actually explore any in depth because this is only like 82 pages. But I also really liked the storytelling, like where the story ended up going. Like the ending was fantastic. I couldn't predict anything that happened in the ending, and it really brought together a lot of these things that I didn't necessarily know were important, which was great. However, what I will say is I continue to have the same problems with Brandon Sanderson, namely that I think that the characters are not well done in any of his books. I never seem to understand. I don't ever have a good feel for who the characters are. And I really didn't feel like that in this either. I also just generally do not like his writing style. Just there's something about it that I really, really don't like. And additionally, in this particular book, like there's going to be info dumping at the beginning of like a science fiction novella. Like I just kind of expect that. You just need to you need to center the audience, and you need to do it very, very quickly. So I understand there's going to be some info dumping. But the info dump in this novella happened at the beginning in dialogue between our two main characters in a way that would absolutely never happen if they were actually had been partners for a while. And so it felt just incredibly clunky, and I hated it. And so I really liked when I pull back, I really like the ideas. I like the story. I just hate the execution, and I wish that this idea had been given to some other author to potentially do better. And so I ended up giving this 2 stars. And then after that, I went ahead and picked up Nerds by Michael Buckley. So this is an upper elementary school book, and it basically follows our main character of Jackson, who used to be really popular and is now considered one of the nerds. Only he discovers that the nerds at his school are actually spies that help save the world, and he ends up joining them. And the story goes from there. I didn't like this book either. Now, I do generally try to temper my opinions on these particular books because it's a book my older child picked out. It wasn't something I chose for myself. However, in this case, what I will say is I didn't like it. I could see what it was trying to do. Like, so our main character of Jackson used to be popular, used to be a bully, and now he's one of the nerds. And so, I like that the book is actually acknowledging both sides of the bullying and what it must feel like to be that, what some people feel as a bully, where they think it's funny, right? And the book is trying to make the point that while you think it's funny, if the other person isn't laughing, then it's probably just mean. And so I just don't think it did a very good job of making that point, unfortunately. And there were other things that I really didn't like how long it took Jackson to figure out that he was just mean, even though he was experiencing bullying in the same way. It was just like, man, you're a little, I wish you had got this a little bit sooner. There was another agent on the team who was always described as either fat or chubby. Like, that was the only thing. And I'm okay with fat as a neutral descriptor, but in this, it really didn't feel like it was being a neutral descriptor. It felt like it was being very judgmental. And so I didn't like that either. Then there was this weird other thing where occasionally we'd get stuff that was just like reinforcing incorrect ideas. So one of the kids is hyperactive and it's like referred to as nervous energy, which is mostly not correct for people. It was just a bunch of stuff that's just like really not great. And so I ended up giving this 2 stars. This is the kind of thing where, like, if I saw a kid reading it, I'm not going to say anything, but this is never going to be in my list of recommendations for books for kids. So there you go. After that, I went ahead and read Mangoes and Mistletoe by Adriana Herrera, which is an adult contemporary romance where we're following these 2 women who are Dominican, and they are in Scotland in both competing in a baking competition. They get paired up, but it's not exactly the instant great partnership that they maybe need to be able to win this. But sparks do fly, and the story goes from there. So if I didn't mention it, this is actually a novella, so very, very short. But what I will say is I think that this was incredibly well paced. It just moved forward. It kept pushing forward. We didn't dwell too long on anything, which I actually really appreciated. I did actually believe in the emotions of this. I know that some people, I read it as part of a book club, and I know some people really thought that it was too quick. However, I absolutely do understand that when they're at a competition and they're the 2 Dominican ladies, right? And so I can understand being kind of outsiders in a group and that helping you to form a connection. I actually do really appreciate that. And so, like, the emotions of this, I actually did feel like it was more realistic. And especially because when I got to the end, I didn't read it as I'm always going to love you, I'm completely in love with you, but more, I think that if we try this, it's going to go really well, which I also have felt in my lifetime. So again, I found that to be very believable. And I actually just ended up liking our main characters, Sully and Kikeia, I believe is how it's pronounced. So I just really, really liked them as well. Now, I didn't find it fully believable, but I honestly, for a holiday romance novella, I'm not expecting super believable, so that didn't bother me at all. And I will say that if you're really into the baking aspect of this book, we didn't really dwell too much on the competition or the baking part of it, even though, like, when we got to flavor profiles and describing certain things, they sounded great and I could have used a little bit more, but I understand why we cut it to keep it more novella length. But just know going in that it's not going to be as much as you want for the baking part. But I did really like this, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. And then lastly, we have The Love Hypothesis by Allie Hazelwood. So this is also an adult contemporary romance, and in it we're following a character by the name of Olive, and she is a graduate student in the biology department at Stanford. And one night she is at the lab, and out of the corner of her eye, she sees her best friend, which is a problem because she told her best friend she was on a date. So she finds the closest guy and ends up kissing him. Only it turns out to be the hotshot professor of the biology department, and rumors start flying basically immediately. And so the professor and Olive decide to lean into it and just fake date because they both can get something out of the situation. And the story goes from there. So this is also another popular adult contemporary romance that I did not actually like and didn't even finish. So I DNF'd this at page 54. I really, really disliked the writing style of this. I found it to be, I just didn't connect with it. I didn't feel like there was any emotion behind these words, which was just really strange to me. And I know that not everybody has had this problem. So take it with a grain of salt. But I did struggle to feel like there was any emotion in it. But also, I didn't like Olive, and it was two major issues that I had. The biggest one being that she felt very immature. So she's supposed to be 26, but to me, she read like she was like 21. And the thing is, I pick up adult romance in the hopes that it's going to be a more mature adult romance, not a YA romance, not a new adult romance. Like older adult romance. And so it was very unhappy for me to have this character who felt very immature for her age. But also I occasionally had issues because she's supposed to be a graduate student, a scientist, and she's missing little bits of evidence and clues and things. And I was just like, really? Okay, I thought that you were good at this, and apparently not. So I just generally did not like her. I didn't really like her. And again, we're back to this is a single perspective romance, which just generally doesn't work as well for me. So I did not get on with this, so I went ahead and DNF'd it. So yeah, that is everything that I read, or at least attempted to read in the first 2 weeks. It was not a great reading month. It's like I had 2 DNFs, I had 2 2-stars, and I had 1 4-star, 1 4.5 star. Which, I mean, like, yay for the 4 and 4.5, but the other 4 were not good. Anyway, as for points for my goals, just real quick, for the Unhoneymooners, I got 1 point. For the Bronze Beast, I got 3 points because it's the last book in the series. Snapshot, I also got 3 points because it was number 3 on my Goodreads TBR. So it was the 3rd oldest book there. And then for Nerds, I got 1 point. For Mangoes and Mistletoe, I got 1 point. And then the Love Hypothesis was also 1 point. So that gave me a total of 10 points. So I just need to get I think 11 more to reach my goal of 50 by the end of the year. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I will leave my video link down below where I explain how I was going to start doing points for my goals. But that is it. So if you have any thoughts or feelings about anything that I talked about in this video, please leave me a comment down below. Like this video if you liked it. And until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!